What role in the Middle East, again, does Israel play in this?
Israel was created as the instrument to bring about the Battle of Armageddon and the fulfillment of prophecy, a war that will be so terrible, where nuclear weapons will be used, so that the American citizens and the other people in the world will get down on their knees and beg for no more war. And what is the answer to that? They're going to be told the only way we can guarantee no more war is if we destroy the sovereignty of nations and we come together as one humanity in a one-world government.
Right.
The IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003. The IC continues to monitor closely if Tehran decides to reauthorize its nuclear weapons program.
But how close do you personally think that they were to getting one? Because Tulsi Gabbard testified in March that the intelligence community said Iran wasn't building a nuclear weapon.
I don't care what she said. I think they were very close to having it.
As we saw there, Netanyahu has been fixated with Iran's nuclear program for decades now. Will the U.S. finally give him what he wants?
It seems it is. Just judging from the movements of the American president and the various reports the past 24 hours, clearly Trump is up to something when he talks about unconditional surrender. But this is not just Netanyahu. Just for the record, since you've had this excellent package, it's good to recall that the United States started warning about Iranian nuclear weapon back in 1981. That's before Netanyahu entered into politics. And it had repeated that for the past 40 years as well. It seemed like the Americans and Netanyahu have been echoing one another about an Iranian threat. And the question is why? Why do they do that? Because mission accomplished in Iraq was done several months after the war started. But it was not mission accomplished. That's the problem here, is that you can even occupy Tehran as Bush occupied Baghdad. But then what? Then 20 years of tormenting the Iraqis, and the Iraqis tormenting the Americans, costing them more than $3 trillion. Look at Pakistan, look at Afghanistan. They occupied it in a matter of hours. They kicked out the Taliban. For 20 years, they have gone on in that war, and they got humiliated. The same could happen in Iran.
So, which brings me to this question then. What is the only way, if there is a way, that Israel and the U.S. can defeat Iran today?
They can defeat Iran. But then what? This is the problem, right? These are all Pyrrhic victories. Victories are concepts for, narrow-minded politicians and poets. There is no victory because they've tried it for so many years. Didn't they start with regime change in Iran back in 1953, 70 years ago? And what's the result? Didn't they do the same once and again? How many wars were fought by Israel and the United States in the Middle East? And each time they declare victory, they declare defeat. No one is defeated because this cycle of wars and violence in the Middle East cannot be won by airplanes.
I spoke with Major B, an Israeli fighter pilot who is on the front lines of this war. Take a listen. Can you talk about those dangers? Were there any efforts to shoot down Israeli jets? What does Iranian air defense look like?
So when you ask about attempts, I will say that it's pretty obvious that the Iranian regime doesn't like the Israeli fighter jets flying over their skies, and they do have they have advanced their technologies on their side in the past years as well as we have. And we've been practicing and training for this type of scenario. So what we have done in the first 24 hours is create that environment so that whichever surface-to-air threat we would face, we'd be able to make sure that our side wins.
We don't want Iran to acquire nuclear weapons or ballistic capabilities. But I think the biggest mistake we can make today is to use military means to bring about regime change in Iran, because that would mean chaos.
Well before sunrise, President Trump returned to Washington to be in place as commander-in-chief as Israel and Iran launch a new round of attacks.
He has some evaluations and decisions to make. We know he does not want a wider war. The number one goal here is to contain Iran.
Israel and Iran are on their 5th day of fighting, and Israeli officials believe their strikes have significantly set back Iran's nuclear program.
We've taken out their main enrichment facility at Natanz. We've taken out their conversion facility in Isfahan. We're on the road to victory, and we're deeply grateful for President Trump's support of what we are doing.
Right now, the U.S. is not involved offensively in the conflict, but the Pentagon says U.S. forces are standing by. The president says he's not interested in a ceasefire and has his sights set on something bigger.
And then a real end, not a ceasefire. And then
For American troops to get involved, President Trump would need approval from Congress, but even Republicans are split on U.S. intervention.
Well, I think Iran is in a really tough spot here, entirely of their own making. They're not used to having a president who doesn't try to bribe them with stuff like Obama did or kowtow to them and give them freebies like Biden did. They've got a president here who puts America first, who's going to do what's in America's best interests. And I think Trump's been really clear. Iran's not going to get a nuke, so they can either come to the table and surrender their nuclear program freely, peaceably, as Trump is offering, or they can face Israel on their own.
Do you think there's a danger of not allowing Israel to finish the job? This will be all for naught unless they can get rid of the entire nuclear program. That includes Fordo.
I think that President Trump, I trust him on this. I think he has handled this situation very, very deftly. And my view is that he's going to continue to put America's security interests first. He's given Israel a lot of space to protect themselves, which is what they're doing, to put their security interests, make sure that Israel sees to its own security interests. I think that's entirely appropriate. And I think the president here is continuing to be consistent, saying Iran's not getting a nuke. And if Iran wants to come to the table and surrender their nuclear program, the United States is here to help that. Otherwise, Iran is not going to get any cover from the United States. We're not going to bail them out of this. We're not going to protect them like previous American presidents, frankly, have done.
Are we going to see the Iraq playbook, you think, being applied to Iran?
There's absolutely no doubt about that. If I had any doubt, I could then just add up the 4 or 5 elements that built up in a manufactured way by the Bush administration. One, that the nuclear threat was imminent, that a yellow mushroom cloud would be approaching America if America didn't act first, that Saddam was going to give those nuclear weapons to Al-Qaeda. And now they said, Netanyahu says that Iran was going to give them to the Houthis. And that nothing short of regime change is going to happen. Again, see that with Iraq, now we see it with Iran. So Netanyahu is definitely playing that book each and every step of the way. And the problem is that they are eating it away, both in Israel and the United States. In Israel, there is a kind of a bit of an appetite for it. There's an Israeli scholar, an excellent Israeli scholar, who wrote the book called Iran Phobia.
Marwan, as we're talking, we are watching live pictures of the skies over Tel Aviv, and the Israeli military saying its defensive systems are operating to intercept missiles which have been just launched from Iran. We saw that a few minutes ago, and the interceptors apparently at work right now. This is a live picture from Tel Aviv, Israel. The Iranians are firing a number of missiles in the last few minutes, which we understand have been intercepted by Israel's defense systems. We were talking about the Americans. You mentioned George Bush, Marwan. What do you think has changed now, specifically now, to make Donald Trump consider and determined, it would seem, to take the U.S. to war? He'd been so vocal in the past about wanting to keep the Americans out of the world's problems, out of the Middle East. What's changed, do you think?
These sorts of things require more than military solutions. You can't transform societies by military solutions. We are not in the mindset of World War II. This is a whole other ballgame.
The world is sitting on a knife's edge, and the pressure is building. Why? Because 3 major world religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all claim the same hill in Jerusalem as holy ground. this isn't just a matter of historical significance. It's an issue of truly biblical proportions. A prophetic time bomb waiting to detonate. The hill at the center of it all is the Temple Mount, a hill soaked in centuries of faith, blood, and expectation. Jewish prophecy expects a third temple to be built on this hill. This is the very location where the first temple, built by wise King Solomon under God's instruction, once stood in all its glory. It was a place where God's presence dwelled, where sacrifices were offered, and where Israel met with their God. After its destruction by the Babylonians, the second temple was constructed by the returning exiles and later expanded by Herod the Great. This second temple too was destroyed in 70 AD by the Romans, fulfilling the prophecy of Jesus in Matthew chapter 24 verse 2, where he said, "Not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down." Yet Jewish tradition and scripture still point toward a third temple. This promise is not allegorical or symbolic in the eyes of observant Jews. It is literal. The temple must be rebuilt on the exact same site as the previous two, for that is the sacred ground chosen by God. And herein lies the conflict. The Dome of the Rock now occupies that space. This golden shrine, constructed in 691 AD by the Umayyad Caliphate, marks the spot Muslims believe the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven during the night journey known as the Isra and Miraj. For Islam, this is the third holiest site after Mecca and Medina, known as the Haram al-Sharif, or the Noble Sanctuary. It is a place of profound reverence and importance for their religion. While we will not delve deeply into Islamic eschatology, it is essential to recognize that this location is literally their third holiest site, and they believe it to be sacred ground, adding to the explosive potential should any attempt be made to rebuild the Jewish temple there. From a Christian perspective, especially within the futurist school of eschatology, the rebuilding of the Jewish temple is not merely a religious event, but a prophetic necessity. According to Scripture, this temple will exist in the last days and will play a central role in the fulfillment of end times events. Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, speaks of a covenant confirmed by a coming ruler for 1 week, interpreted as 7 years, with sacrifices being stopped halfway through. This presumes the existence of an operating temple where sacrifices can take place. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 4 speaks of the man of sin, the Antichrist, who sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. And Revelation chapter 11 verse 1-2 describes John being told to measure the temple, while the outer court is given to the Gentiles. All of these passages point to a future temple that will not only exist, but will also be desecrated by the Antichrist. This makes the temple not just a Jewish concern, but a focal point for all who study and believe in biblical prophecy. The Bible is clear. There will be a temple in the last days. It will be built. It will be defiled. And it will trigger events that lead directly to the return of Jesus Christ. Now consider the tension. For a third temple to rise on the Temple Mount, something of monumental significance must occur. Either the Dome of the Rock must be removed, destroyed, or somehow accommodated. One scenario that has gained traction among some theologians, scholars, and planners is the possibility that both the Dome of the Rock and the Third Temple could stand side by side on the same mount. This concept, though seemingly impossible now, envisions a future where architectural reconfiguration or political negotiation allows for the construction of the temple without the destruction of the dome. Such an arrangement would require an unprecedented level of global cooperation Perhaps it will even be orchestrated by the Antichrist himself, a charismatic global figure who appears to offer peace and unity, but ultimately seeks to deceive.